Okay, so let's talk about adding details to our mug. Okay, so I have my clay tools. I'm gonna set to the side. I'm going to take my mug out of my bag, okay, or however we are storing it. And it's really important that when you take this out, that you make sure that the can move. You don't need to take it out entirely. If it's really, really hard for you to take out, let me know and I will help you. But it should be able to slide out. Then you can just push it back down with that paper towel still around it to make sure that the can will not stick, okay? Or the clay won't stick to the can. All right, so I might need to do a little bit more smoothing out because I've taken out of my bag. So that's one thing that you'll want to always look for. If there's any little cracks or imperfections, you'll need to check that daily, okay? So what I'm going to be doing is I am going to be using my extra clay from my bag here. And the theme for this mug is going to be donuts, okay? So I'm just gonna take a little piece. I don't need it all right now, so I'm gonna put the extra back in the bag, put it off to the side. And I can use the slab roller. I can just use my hands to create some of this stuff. I'm just gonna continue to use my hands here. So I'm just creating a little slab, and I said I wanted my theme to be donuts, okay? So I'm gonna use the tools in here to attach different things to it. So I'm going to use my needle tool. I also have a pencil because sometimes I like to have that for detail, and I have my slip container here as well because I'm really going to need that. So because I know I'm going to be creating quite a few donuts, one thing you might want to do is get a piece of paper from me and draw out the design, okay? And then what you can do is actually just cut that out, especially if you're going to be using a repeating shape so that you don't have to make it multiple times, okay? So I've already cut this one out for one of my donuts. So I'm going to make this as thin as I can. So I'm going to use my pencil to kind of roll it out a bit. Oh, I got a little stuck there. Here, we'll continue doing this. Okay, so I'm gonna take this and then I can just trace around it. Now, maybe I could make two of them, so maybe I want to move this over here. And we'll lightly just trace around our object. Now, there's a variety of ways that we can make donuts for this, so I'm gonna show you a couple of different ways, okay? So here's the first method of using a stencil. Okay, so then after I have that, if I need to, I can just carve around. Cut out that inside. All right, I'll put that out to the side. Now, you will see that there's little areas that will need to be smoothed out. So then you could go in and start maybe adding some details to it, depending on what you want your donut to look like. So I want mine to kind of look like it's half frosted. So I'm adding a line of frosting here. And then I'm going to take this little loop tool and I'm actually going to carve out some of this detail. And you might decide to do this detail part after you've added it to your clay piece, and that's okay too. Because sometimes, like right now, this is pretty wet, so it makes it harder to carve, okay? So I'm gonna smooth and work on shaping this a little bit. So now I can decide, okay, am I gonna add sprinkles on? Am I gonna carve them in? That's gonna be up to you. But once you create kind of your stencil shape like this, then what we'll need to do is slip and score to attach it on. Now, we haven't added our handle yet, so make sure that you are leaving a space for that handle. So remember to score. I'm going to score the back of this. Find a place where I'm going to attach it here. I'm going to kind of score around. Use my slip. Then I'm going to press gently to apply. Okay. So then I'm going to have to recarve some of those details in here, which is okay. But that's why you might want to save the carving until it's been attached on. Now, one thing I like to do to make sure things are really attached is to take the back of a pencil or one of these tools and just kind of smooth this down into it. This makes sure that it's really, really attached on there. Okay. So, and then I'm going to work on kind of finishing some of these details a little bit, but I'll do that later on. Okay. So then another way I could choose to add a donut on here. Okay. I could just freehand draw, or I can do what's called creating a coil. So I'm going to take some of my extra clay and I'm just going to roll it into a ball. And I'm going to take my hands and it's going to be like creating like a little snake or a worm. Making sure I'm rotating this around 360. Then what I can do is I can kind of cut the shape that I need. So I'm going to use this tool here. And instead of slipping and scoring this right now, you might have to do that. But I'm actually just going to smooth this together. Okay, so that might be too skinny of a donut, so I might decide, you know what, maybe I want it to be a little bit smaller. So I would just make this circle a little bit smaller, or I'd make this coil wider. But this is one way then that I could go in and I could start adding some donut details on by slipping and scoring that on as well. And then once I have it added on here, I could start adding like the sprinkle details and stuff like that, okay? Another option that you might want to do is, I'm going to pull a little more clay here, creating like a mini pinch pot. So some of you guys are probably like, well, why isn't she just rolling a ball, sticking a hole through it, and attaching that on there? Okay, that was pretty simple. Okay, but here's the deal. This is going to be so thick, it's going to take a really long time to dry. So instead, you can start by rolling that ball. And so that we can hollow out some of these forms, then I'm going to kind of make like a half donut by pinching around. Okay, then I could work on smoothing that out because that is not very rounded, but using your different tools, your hands, to kind of smooth some of those things out a bit. Sometimes I even like to kind of roll it around on here to help with that. But then you could create a donut shape this way where it's a little bit more hollowed out and it's not going to be super thick and trap that moisture in there. Because remember, if our clay pieces are too thick, it's not going to dry. And when the clay doesn't dry, it explodes in the kiln if anything's wet. So then I could take this, carve out my area, flatten it out a bit. Here's where I want my donut shape to be. I could just punch through again or draw that out. So now this isn't as thick of a piece. It's a little bit more hollowed out. Okay. So it's going to dry a lot better. So then I have more of a three-dimensional donut shape that I could actually add to here. And I think I kind of like that. So I'm going to add this donut over here, and it has some major work to do on it, but I'm going to score. And to make sure I have the right size, I'm just going to mark a couple of places. So I'm going to score around here. Use my slip. lightly begin pressing into it. Okay, so then I could use kind of this outside tool to once again smooth out any of that. Then once I have that all smoothed out and ready to go, like I got a lot of smoothing to do over here, then I could start adding in my donut details on here by carving into it. One other option that you might do is maybe you just want to carve into. So maybe I want to just draw lightly, and if you need to, the pencil works really well for this. You just kind of lightly carve into it. So I can draw my donut design. And then I could carve in the details that way and then get rid of those little flaky things as they dry. So that's another way that you can do that. And if you make a mistake, you're not carving in so deep that you can just, like for instance, if this, I was like, oh, I don't like that, I can just smooth over it to kind of erase it, okay? So those are some different ways that you can start adding on details to your mug.